At the beginning of the movie, we see a large number of bombers heading towards the island of Nauru in 1943. In one of them is our protagonist, bomber navigator Louis Zamperini. The young man is almost ready to drop ammunition when the planes are hit by a retaliatory strike. The hatch jams, and Louis is forced to try to fix it while the enemy circles around. Casualties appear on board. Louis supports his injured friend and returns to the hatch. However, it is at this point that their plane is clipped, and the hero almost goes down. At the cost of a lot of effort, the crew still manages to deal with the enemy, although the plane is badly damaged. Louis informs the pilots Phil and Kapu about it, and the men reply that it is still possible to fly for the time being. The hero realizes that it may not be possible for them to get there. The action moves to the past, where young Louis listens to a sermon in church. However, the boy is not particularly interested in it, but his father tries to force him to listen and think about God. After that, young Louis escapes from the policeman and hides the stolen trinkets in his stash. However, his idyll is interrupted by boys who insult him for being Italian and advise him to return to his homeland. Louis is saved from reprisal by a policeman who brings the hero home and tells his parents about his pranks and the fight. The boy's father becomes furious and punishes his son, asking why he does such a thing and dishonors their family. Sitting on the stairs, Louis watches his mother cook with a smile and hears her prayers before going to bed. The next day, the boy's brother, Pete, sees that the boy is running pretty fast. Then the young man decides to start training with Louis and make a runner out of him. Pete says that if the boy trains and does not break down, he will definitely win, but if he lives as he does now, he will end up a homeless vagrant. These words give Louis determination, but he still doesn't believe in himself. After a while, the boy gets to his first competition and gets into the team, after which he continues training. Pete follows his younger brother's successes with joy and admiration, and we see how the grown-up Louis continues his training. The young man takes the first places in competitions, which makes his parents and Pete very happy. Louis's successes are so colossal that the hero goes to the Olympics in Berlin. He realizes that he will not win, but tells Pete that the next Olympics will definitely bring him glory. On the platform, the brothers say goodbye and Louis says he is very grateful for the way Pete supported him and saved him from a bad life. In parting, the young man receives wisdom from his brother: a moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory. The action returns to 1943, where Louis fearfully waits for his plane to hit the ground and hopes that the pilots will be able to land it. During the descent, Phil realizes that the speed is too high, but luckily all comes out safely, although the landing gear is wiped to the ground. Louis cheers and encourages the crew, but then notices that one of the wounded is already dead. As he gets out of the plane, he sees Phil praying on the beach. Louis assesses this skeptically, but tells him that his mother also prays often. Even while on the base, the hero does not stop his training and tries to stay in shape, and his training is monitored by Cap. After it, Phil comes to them with the guys and informs them that they have to go on a rescue mission. However, during the flight a terrible thing happens, because the old airplane, which everyone was laughing at recently, stops one of the engines, and soon the second one. Phil informs them to prepare for a fall. The action moves back to the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin. Louis' family eagerly listens to all the information about the competition on the radio, while the hero himself is almost ready for the race. From the third group, Louis moves to the second, which his family welcomes with undisguised delight. Feeling exhausted, the hero, as if he hears in his head the supporting words of his brother, and makes the last spurt. Even the announcer speaks about Louis with delight, saying that the young man set a new record by running the last lap in 56.2 seconds. Meanwhile, in 1943, the hero waits fearfully for the plane to collide with the water surface. Louis is trapped, and the wreckage slowly pulls him under the water. But the hero does not give up, and he still manages to get out and survive. Once on the surface, Louis sees that of the entire crew, the injured Phil and Mac are still alive. The young man fearfully thinks about the future, but calms his friends and asks them not to think about bad things. The hero dismantles the supplies and realizes that the wait for help may be long. Inflatable rafts with exhausted heroes drift on the ocean. At night, Mac notices sharks in the water, but they do not cause any harm. The next day, Louis sees an airplane in the sky and decides to send a distress signal, but it goes unanswered. However, the problems do not end there, because it turns out that Mac ate some of the supplies alone, and now it will be even more difficult to survive. After many days, a seagull lands on the raft. Louis catches it and offers to eat it, but such food does not stay in the stomach for long. The heroes do not give up, and decide to try to catch fish with the remains of the seagull, and Phil manages to catch one. The air crash-ravaged men enjoy the food and laugh when Louis starts talking about his mom's gnocchi. One night, the hero talks to Phil about God. After a while, a violent storm begins in the ocean, and Louis prays, promising that if God saves him, he will dedicate his life to him. After the storm, it begins to rain, and the exhausted heroes catch the drops with their mouths. On the 27th day, Louis catches a big fish with his bare hands, and everyone greedily pounces on the food. Suddenly, an airplane appears in the sky, and the hero manages to attract its attention. However, it turns out that it belongs to the enemy, and arranges a shelling. Louis and the others manage to save themselves by jumping into the water. But later it turns out that the enemies have damaged the boats. Louis tries to patch them up when a shark suddenly comes out of the water. He is saved by Mac, who reacts instantly and manages to fight back against the predator. A few days after the incident, Louis tells a barely breathing Mac how to make gnocchi. The young man says goodbye to his life, and Louis, together with Phil, helps him to go on his last ocean voyage. One day, the hero suddenly notices that there is a Japanese warship near them. They are taken prisoner and brought to the island. The colonel interrogates Louis and recognizes him as a famous athlete. The Japanese require him to draw a detail of one of the bombers. However, the hero draws not what was required of him, because he does not want to help the enemy. Louis almost goes insane in a cramped, dark cell, but he is suddenly taken outside and placed next to Phil. The hero guesses that they are going to be shot, and mentally prepares for it. However, the men are doused with water and then sent blindfolded to Japan. There, Phil and Louis are forcibly separated and put into different cars. The hero finds himself in a camp for prisoners of war, where Corporal Watanabe commands. A cruel superior, who almost immediately commits bullying on Louis for looking at him. The hero finds himself in a barracks run by Tom Miller. There Louis meets Captain Fitzgerald and learns that Watanabe's nickname among the prisoners is Bird. The next day, the corporal learns that the hero is an Olympic athlete and decides to organize a small competition for him. However, due to exhaustion, Louis cannot overcome the distance first, and Watanabe calls him a nothing. In the evening, the hero learns that Fitzgerald has organized a small secret society to spy on the Japanese. The prisoners of war are exhausted by hard labor, and Watanabe soon learns that some of the prisoners have been copying their maps and gathering information. The corporal punishes Miller, and Louis discusses with Fitzgerald that his brother always believed in him and asked him not to give up. After a while, the hero is informed that he is presumed dead in America, but he can tell his family that he is alive by radio if he wants to. When Pete learns of this, he almost cries, and Louis' mother thanks God for saving her son. The radio hosts offer the captive athlete a deal that if he performs for them on the radio and tells them that America is not so good, they will give the man comfortable housing and food in return. Louis refuses and says he won't lie about his country, and they return him back to the camp. Watanabe talks to the hero, saying that he immediately sensed strength in the young man, and respecting this, wanted to make him his friend. However, Louis condemned himself to suffering by disobeying and deliberately pissing off his superiors. Watanabe informs that each of the captives should punch the hero in the face to teach him a good lesson. Fitzgerald refuses, but the corporal orders Miller to be brought in, and begins to mock him in front of everyone. Then Louis himself asks his friend to strike him in order to save the other from suffering. The horrible torture ends only in the evening, and the exhausted hero falls to the ground. 2 years later, Watanabe informs Louis that he has received a promotion and leaves the camp. Suddenly at night, the Americans attack Tokyo and strike the camp with the prisoners. Fitzgerald reports that he overhears the officers talking and learns that if the opponents win, they intend to kill all the prisoners. Damage at the camp forces the command to send the prisoners to Camp Naoetsu. On the way to the train, Louis notices how much destruction and hardship an attack by either side brings with it. Unexpectedly, the hero again meets his nemesis, Watanabe, who now commands the place. The chief informs that the prisoners will help the Japanese to work on coal barges. Exhausted Louis and the other prisoners are doing grueling work, trying to forget about their suffering. During the work, one of the guards pushes the hero, causing him to fall down and start limping on one leg. Because of labor and inhuman treatment, Louis begins to lose the will to live. One day he stops to rest while working, and Watanabe decides to punish him for this. He orders the hero to lift a heavy coal load, and orders the guard to shoot the prisoner if he drops it. However, Louis copes with his task, which pisses off Watanabe, and he begins to beat the disobedient and proud captive. After a while everything ends, the Americans get to Japan and release all the prisoners. The joyful men congratulate each other and wash away the coal dust in the river. At this time Louis decides to look for Watanabe, but finds his room empty, and guesses that the cruel boss found out about everything before everyone else, and simply ran away. After a while, the hero returns to America, and descending from the airplane, kisses his native land, and later reunites with his family. At the end of the movie, we are told the real story of Louis Zamperini after he returned from Japan. The man married in 1946 and had 2 children. Phil also survived what happened to him in the POW camp and returned home and was friends with Louis for many years. A few years later, Watanabe was found, and Louis Zamperini, having dealt with the stress, fulfilled his promise to serve the Lord. The man returned to Japan and was reconciled with his former jailers. However, only Watanabe refused to meet with him. Louis's dream came true and he ran again in the Olympic Games, but at the age of 80. This is the end of the movie. Thank you all for watching this video to the end. Give this video a like. Write in the comments what you think about this movie, and see you in new videos.